When actor Robert Forster passed away in October 2019, his home in the Hollywood Hills sat untouched for nearly 2 years. No estate sale, no listing, just a Spanish-style villa perched above Los Angeles, hidden behind ivy-covered gates, its windows dark and still like the eyes of someone deep in thought. I was one of the first agents approached when the family quietly decided to sell. No public listing, no open houses. Word of mouth only. They said they wanted someone calm and low profile. I understood what that meant. Discretion. But I didn't ask why. Not until later. The buyers were a couple from Austin, Texas, Joel and Naomi Harrington. Mid-30s, no kids, both worked remotely in tech. They were quiet, polite, ideal candidates. Naomi had grown up obsessed with old films. She mentioned Jackie Brown when we pulled into the driveway for the first time. I remember how she smiled, running her hand along the cracked terracotta railing, like she was touching something sacred. They moved in during the summer of 2022. That first week, Naomi texted me a photo of the backyard view. The sun was setting over the hills, and she captioned it, "He picked the perfect spot." I didn't hear from them for 4 months. Then Joel called me. His voice was flat, slow. He asked if the property had any known disturbances. I thought he meant pests or plumbing. But he clarified. "No, I mean anything weird. Paranormal." I paused, heart skipping. "Why do you ask?" He told me about the footsteps. Every night around 2 a.m., someone walked across the second floor, heel to toe, slow and steady. Doors that had been locked in the evening would swing open by morning. Naomi's perfume bottles were rearranged daily, always in perfect symmetry, something she never did herself. The thermostat changed on its own, always to 74 degrees. That was Robert Forster's favorite temperature, according to an old interview she found later. They also noticed the guest room door, the one Forster reportedly used as a study, wouldn't stay closed. Even when Joel screwed in a new latch, it popped open around the same time each night with a loud click. They tried keeping it open, but the dog wouldn't go near it. It sat there, whining, tail low, staring into the room like someone was inside. Naomi started sleeping during the day, said she felt watched at night. She began whispering things Joel couldn't hear. Claimed Robert wasn't gone, just disappointed. Joel asked her what that meant. She didn't answer. By early winter, Naomi had set up a camera in the hallway. Not for evidence, for comfort. She said if she could see something, maybe she wouldn't be so afraid. But the feed never showed anything unusual, except the sound at 1:58 a.m. Every night, 3 slow knocks from inside the hallway wall. Never louder, never off schedule. Joel emailed me a clip of it once. I still have it. The knocks are dry, wooden, and deliberate. You can hear Naomi's breath hitch just before the third knock lands. They tried bringing in a medium. Older woman, LA-based, used to work with studios in the 80s. She walked through the house with her hands out, eyes half closed. After 15 minutes, she said, "He never left. Not because he's angry, because he loved this place too much. He still thinks it's his." She left without asking for money. The Harringtons stayed for another 3 months. Then, without warning, they packed up. Sold the house to a holding company in an off-market deal. I heard Naomi stopped working. Joel deleted his social media. No forwarding address. But before they left, Naomi called me one last time. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "I don't think he meant to scare us," she said. "He just couldn't let go." Then she paused. "You know what's strange? He always walked to the same spot in the hallway. Every night. Right in front of this framed movie poster. But it wasn't centered. It was always crooked. I tried fixing it. Every time it tilted again overnight. After we left, I looked it up. It was the original Jackie Brown poster, the one featuring Forster, front and center. "That's where he stood," she whispered, like he was trying to straighten his own memory. The house still hasn't been listed again. It's managed by a property firm now. Empty. Shutters drawn. No gardeners. No lights. But if you drive up into the hills just past midnight, you might see a faint glow in the upstairs window. And if you're really quiet, Park across the street and roll down your window. You might hear slow, deliberate footsteps walking the same path they always have. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The villa sat quiet on Mulholland Drive beneath the weight of early January fog. Every surface outside slick with dew. Paint peeled gently from the wooden shutters like dried petals, and the palm fronds, long neglected, hung like tattered curtains over the broken stone steps. Real estate photos had once shown the house sun-drenched and glowing. But in the soft gloom of winter, the structure had changed, looked heavier, like it had been holding its breath for far too long. When the Harringtons left, they didn't say goodbye to anyone, not even the neighbors. Their departure was swift, almost surgical. Movers arrived just before dawn and were gone before lunch. The front door was left ajar for most of the morning, and one of the gardeners, a man named Elias who had worked on the grounds since the early 2000s, stood across the street watching, his hat clenched in his hands. When asked later why he didn't approach, he only shook his head and muttered, "That house doesn't want people anymore." The property sat vacant for months. But strange things don't rest just because no one's watching. In March of the following year, a new company acquired the home, an anonymous LLC out of Arizona, presumably with intentions of flipping it or using it as a short-term rental. The first signs of renovation began in April. A white van appeared in the circular drive one morning. The driver, a man in his 40s named Desmond, who worked for a private contracting firm specializing in historical properties. He and his two-man crew set up a temporary base inside the detached garage. Desmond didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in wiring issues and pipe shifts and poor insulation. When he was first told the house had a history, he laughed. Said, "I've heard worse. Hell, I've lived in worse." The first few days were uneventful. The crew stripped the wallpaper from the hallway, revealing layers of paint beneath oyster white, sunburnt beige, then finally a deep tobacco brown from the 1970s. They gutted the outdated kitchen, removed the cracked tile from the master bath. But then came the wall. It was a small section, oddly recessed, on the second floor hallway near the master bedroom. One of the crew, a young guy named Armando, had been measuring for insulation when he noticed something strange. The stud placement was inconsistent, like the wall had been sealed hastily at some point, covering a cavity that wasn't part of the original blueprint. Desmond, curious, marked the drywall and took a utility knife to it. Came off easier than expected. No insulation, just empty space. Inside was a narrow compartment, no more than 3 feet wide and 6 feet tall, sealed off with old plywood. And at the bottom of that compartment, almost perfectly centered, was a folded chair, the kind you'd find on a low-budget film set. Rusted at the hinges, dust-coated, and etched into the wood in faded gold lettering R. Forster. Desmond pulled it out, inspected it, then leaned it against the hallway wall. He and Armando stood in silence. "How the hell did this get in there?" Armando asked, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe a tribute? Closet space turned into a kind of shrine?" Desmond speculated, though even he didn't sound convinced. They left it in the hallway and resumed work downstairs. That night, around 2 a.m., the motion sensor on the garage camera flicked on. There was no wind, no raccoons, just an image. The hallway light turning on by itself. A slow, warm glow spreading across the floorboards. Then, the chair, the same one they'd propped against the wall, appeared, just slightly shifted, tilted toward the door of the former study. No one spoke about it the next morning. The footage was dismissed as a glitch, but Desmond unplugged the camera after that, claiming it was draining the generator. Then the knocking started. Soft at first, always from inside the same section of wall they had opened. Came in threes, steady, hollow, sometimes at midnight, sometimes just before dawn. Once, Desmond stayed late alone, hoping to catch the source in the act. He brought a level and a stethoscope, crouched by the wall in silence, and listened. When the knocks came, they were closer than he expected. Too close. He pressed the stethoscope tighter to the drywall, his fingers trembling. He could hear something breathing, but not mechanical or animal. Human, rhythmic, deep. That night he slept in his truck. By the end of the week, Armando quit. Said he didn't feel right in the house anymore. Claimed he saw a reflection in a window that didn't match what was in the room. Another worker reported the lights flickering every time someone walked past the hallway, only that hallway. Tools went missing, then reappeared on the stairs. A tape measure was found coiled tightly around the doorknob to the study one morning, like someone had taken care to wind it in slow, careful loops. Still, Desmond stayed. Something about the house got under his skin. He started spending nights there, sleeping on a cot in the study, insisting it was easier than the commute. But the truth was stranger. He told one of the electricians quietly, after a long day, that he started dreaming of Robert Forster. Not in a cinematic way, not on a movie set, just standing in the hallway, one hand on the wall, looking at Desmond, mouth closed, eyes heavy, almost mournful. "He's trying to say something," Desmond muttered. "But he doesn't talk, just waits." When asked why he didn't leave, Desmond shrugged. "He's not angry, not yet. He's just alone, still trying to make his last scene right." And still, each night at exactly 1:58 a.m., the knocking comes. 3 times. Always from that same spot in the wall. The chair, long since removed, now sits in a locked storage unit across town. But the sound hasn't stopped. And Desmond? He still sleeps in the study. And he keeps the hallway light on. Always. By late April, the weather had turned unseasonably cold. Evenings in the Hollywood Hills usually carried a dry stillness, a sort of cinematic hush before the coyotes stirred. But something was different now, heavier in the air, as though the house itself was drawing in breath and holding it behind its cracked plaster lungs. The house was still technically a work site, but no one came anymore. After Armando quit, and another subcontractor claimed he heard someone whisper his name from behind a closed linen closet door, the company reassigned the project. Desmond stayed, alone, unpaid, and apparently unwilling to leave. He started wearing Robert's chair like a memory. Not physically, of course, but metaphorically it was as if he carried the weight of it with him, like an invisible shadow folded across his back. The chair, once removed to storage, had since been replaced by a replica Desmond cobbled together with old wood from the garage. He stained the edges dark, burned the initials RF into the backrest with a soldering iron, and placed it in the exact same position the original had been found within the second-floor hallway, directly across from the study door. Each night he sat in it, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes until morning. He said nothing, wrote nothing, just sat. And when 1:58 a.m. arrived, the knocks always came. 3 of them, dry like the house had a wooden heart that was trying to speak. But something changed in May. It was the night of a rainstorm rare for LA, the kind that pulls down eucalyptus bark and floods gullies with runoff. The gutters overflowed. The lights flickered. Desmond sat as he always did, motionless in the chair, a single lamp behind him casting long shadows over the exposed beams and incomplete drywall. The knocking didn't come that night. Instead, there was a scraping, low, rough, like something dragging behind the walls. Not quick, not frantic. Measured, slow, like fingernails being drawn across unfinished lumber. It began behind him, in the section of wall adjacent to the master bedroom, and moved with deliberate pace until it reached the sealed compartment where the chair had once been hidden. Then silence. Desmond didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he pulled open the wall panel again. Despite having already braced and sealed it weeks prior, he found something new. A small paper triangle folded precisely. No dust, no sign of insects or age, just a crisp corner of what looked like a script page. When he unfolded it, the text was typed in courier font, old-school formatting used in screenplay drafts. A short paragraph, a single line of dialogue. "You gotta keep showing up. That's the job." There was no scene number, no character attribution, no title header, just that one line. He spent the rest of the day trying to match it. Googled Forster's scripts, dialogue archives, even obscure interviews. The line didn't match anything he could find. And yet it sounded like him. It felt like something Robert Forster would say. Something only he could say. Desmond began sleeping less. Not because he was scared, he said he wasn't scared, but because he was afraid to miss something. as if the house were communicating now in fragments. A line of dialogue, a movement in the drywall, the faint scent of aftershave that occasionally wafted out of the bathroom, though no one had lived there in nearly a year. And the hallway, it changed, too. It grew colder. Not in the ghost story sense of temperature dropping, but a deeper cold, a kind of emotional absence. The kind you feel when someone important leaves the room and doesn't come back. The air thickened in that spot, particularly near the study door. A subtle shift in pressure that made your eardrums contract ever so slightly when you passed it. Desmond started talking out loud to the hallway. He'd sit in the chair and say things like, "I'm here. You can keep going." Or, "Let me know what you need." And once this was recorded on an old iPhone voice memo, he whispered, "You didn't get your last scene, did you?" The recording cuts off right after that. But if you play it with headphones just before the final second, there's a sound. A single word, barely audible, like a breath pushed through a dry throat. It says close. Not angry, not mournful, just tired. By early June, Desmond's hair had started to gray around the temples. Not from age, he was only 42, but stress. He looked thinner. His fingers shook slightly when he turned doorknobs, like he'd been keeping some kind of psychic tension inside his arms. He boarded up the guest room, moved the cot into the hallway instead, right next to the replica chair. Then, one night, this was June 9th, the knocking came earlier. 1:45 a.m. 3 raps. Then, again at 1:52. 3 more. By the time 1:58 came, the house was vibrating with it. Not violently, just a gentle, rhythmic thud, as if someone behind the walls was pacing, trying to remember how to move, trying to remember where they were. Desmond didn't record it that night. He sat in the chair, eyes half closed, hands flat on his knees, and whispered something to the air. No one knows what. No microphones. No notes. The next day, he didn't open the house. The lamp stayed off. No motion in the hallway. And yet, when a delivery driver left a package at the door later that afternoon, a set of hinges ordered weeks earlier, he claimed to hear a voice from upstairs. Not angry, not frightened, just repeating the same phrase. "I showed up. I showed up. I showed up." By mid-June, the house on Mulholland sat in a peculiar stillness, not quite abandoned, not quite lived in. The air smelled faintly of pine and plaster dust, and the overgrown jacaranda trees cast tangled, flickering shadows through the tall, salt-smeared windows. The wind didn't blow through the house so much as circle it, as if even nature had learned to walk carefully around its perimeter. Desmond was still there, though no one saw him come or go anymore. Neighbors reported lights in the hallway flickering in the early hours, the silhouette of a man in the window seated perfectly still, never slumped, never in motion, just upright, watching something that no longer existed. He rarely spoke to the delivery men, never answered the door for the city inspector, but he did leave things on the porch. Small objects lined up precisely. A chipped film reel canister, a vintage lighter, a paper coffee cup with the words "Craft Services," Friday wrap scribbled on the side. Each item placed deliberately, like offerings or tributes. No one could say what Desmond was doing in that house anymore. No one except perhaps the house itself. It was late June when the final event occurred, the one that ended it, or at least closed the chapter. The night began like many others. A dry wind scraping through the canyon. Distant sirens over the valley. The hallway lamp glowing amber in the otherwise darkened house. The replica chair positioned exactly where the original had been discovered, facing the study door. And Desmond silent, still waiting. The knocking began at 1:58 a.m., on time as always. 3 times. Hollow and dry. Then a pause. And something new. From the far end of the hall, near the linen closet, came the sound of footsteps. Not loud, not threatening, just soft leather-soled shoes on old wood, slow, certain, like an actor hitting his marks one final time. Desmond didn't move. The lights flickered but didn't go out. The air grew thick, dense with something that wasn't exactly fear but was far from comfort. Something between the two, like the heavy silence in a theater just before the curtain lifts. And then, The study door, the one that had remained shut for months, began to open on its own. Just slightly. Just enough. Desmond stood slowly, knees stiff from hours in the chair, and walked toward it. No words. No shaking. He placed his hand on the door and pushed it the rest of the way open. What he saw inside he never described. But he left the house the next morning. They found him sitting on a bus stop bench down on Ventura Boulevard around 6:30 a.m., still in the same work boots and flannel shirt he'd been wearing for weeks. He looked exhausted but calm. At peace in a way he hadn't been before. A barista from the nearby cafe said he came in later that morning, ordered black coffee, and asked for a paper napkin. On it, he wrote, he just wanted one more take. Not perfection, just presence. To be seen one last time. He finished his coffee and walked out. Desmond was never seen again. The house was listed for sale a few weeks later. No one mentioned the haunting. The LLC rebranded it as a classic modern fixer-upper with historical Hollywood charm. The listing photos were brightened, shadows softened, the hallway deliberately left out. The chair was gone, the walls patched, the study door locked. A young couple from Boston bought it. Samantha and Daniel Cordero, early 30s, graphic designer and a schoolteacher. They loved the idea of living in a house with character. They moved in by August. First, everything was fine. Then Samantha began hearing something. It started as light creaks in the hallway floor at night. But when she got up to check, nothing was there. Then came the scent, old cologne, worn suede, the ghost of coffee and cigarettes lingering near the study door. It didn't scare her. In fact, she said it made her feel nostalgic, though she couldn't explain why. One night, she found Daniel standing in the hallway at 2 a.m., staring at the base of the wall where the replica chair had once stood. He didn't speak, just stood there, like he was waiting for someone to call action. When she touched his arm, he flinched like he'd forgotten he was real. They live there still. They keep the hallway lamp on at night. Always. Sometimes, Samantha swears she hears the rustling of script pages from behind the study door. She once dreamed a man with kind eyes and tired hands told her, just stay in the light. That's all I ever wanted. She woke up crying and didn't know why. They've grown used to it now. And the house? It's quiet. Not empty, never that. But settled. As if the scene finally ended. As if the final take was accepted. And somewhere, behind the walls, someone nodded quietly and said, that's a wrap. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.